Hi, well, this is the next in the series of the CaffèInsights interview that I'm doing with Caffè Culture. And today I am delighted to be talking to Maxwell Collona-Dashwood. Now, Maxwell is a very interesting character. He is, so in this industry, we've got lots of people who are very focused, driven, successful business people. I wouldn't necessarily lump a lot of those people into the entrepreneurial category. Maxwell is an entrepreneur. Maxwell is very coffee focused in terms of nearly everything that he does, for better or for worse at the moment, but he does lots of different things. And the reason why I wanted to talk to Maxwell is we're moving through kind of 4 phases of this whole thing, as far as I can tell. These are an arbitrary 4 phases. But the first phase is effectively everything that happened at that real first chaotic piece, where we have lockdown happens. Will there be a furlough? Will people get grants? All of that panic and chaos that went on there. Second piece was really where we are now, where some people are resolutely shut, and some people are doing takeaway. Some people are doing, grocery. Some people are doing meal prep. Some people are doing full meal delivery. There's all sorts of stuff going on. People are pivoting to the online model. Lots of stuff is going on. And phase 3 is what I would regard as when we open again, and we've got all of this social distancing. We've got all of these challenges. Those people that come off furlough, are they going to be dropped down to 40%? Are they going to have to be made redundant? What level of sales will people actually have? I know that that's going to vary enormously from location to location and business to business. And then finally, phase 4, which is kind of what I wanted to talk to Maxwell about, and I'll tell you why in a second. Phase 4 is a phase where people are actually back out relatively safely. And people are engaging properly. Their behavior will be different. But what I want to talk about is what businesses should be looking like at that stage. Now, Maxwell originally had an events business. Did a few other things as well, because but originally had an events business. Then he opened in Bath with his wife a coffee shop. Nice, simple, basic story to begin with. Off the back of then Maxwell has written at least 2 books, isn't that right? Yeah, one of them a very technical book on water. As I say, a very deep book on water. I have to say, I haven't read that book. No,
there's a bit of a joke in coffee. Not many people have managed to get through the whole thing.
I would have thought so. And then sorry, what's the A to Z book, isn't it?
The Coffee Dictionary, yeah, which is a much broader. That's multiple languages. A much wider audience. Yeah.
Okay, so we've got a little shop, then we've got books coming out, and then we have a roastery, and then we have some interests in a couple of London coffee shops, some interest in a distribution business. And the roastery is not just trade, it's also quite heavily online. It
launched as an online business originally, and then so it went straight to consumer first, wholesale second.
Didn't realize that, right. I think it would be fair to say also you were a pioneer of quality Nespresso type thing.
We were the first to put things like geisha and stuff in a coffee pod, and really sort of make the argument that it was a brew method suitable to get specialty coffee to customers.
Which I remember was that's quite a tough argument to have made in those days.
Yeah, I like tough arguments.
Yeah, well, that's how I think. So
only if I think what's interesting in coffee is if you can show people, if basically you're making a better cup of coffee and you're helping more people drink it, there's always a strong argument there. And it's just about breaking down some of the, it's not, I wouldn't even really call it prejudice, because it's an assumption about a certain way of making coffee or doing something, which actually isn't that hard to break down. Yeah.
Sure. I think, we'll maybe touch on a bit more of that, but I think this industry did have some prejudices. Yeah. I like how you've softened it, but and then most recently, although it's probably been a fairly long, drawn out saga, and we'll maybe not go into all the details of it, Max launched a full kind of production product called Peak Water, which is a jug that basically, well, you tell me what it is.
It's effectively, no, I mean, the reference that most people have is a Brita jug.
Yes.
But imagine that you take the commercial systems that you have in a cafe, which are adjustable, and you put that into a format that people have in their homes. which is a gravity-fed jug you can stick in your fridge. So in a way, the innovation wasn't, reinventing the wheel of how you filter water. It was an application innovation. Yeah.
Yes, sure. Yes. So, I mean, you have a lot of different stuff there, but what you have then, if I was sitting down with Maxwell, say a year ago, either consulting or just having a chat, I would kind of look in and say, or I would be saying to him, you seem to be spreading yourself very thin. Now, I would say this with no judgment, because over the years, I have had 19 separate businesses. I've often got out of businesses far too early. I've often lost focuses in businesses too early. So I've done an awful lot of this myself, and, it provides a lot of interesting experiences. But in theory, the core argument is that you should be really focusing in on the one thing that you do. So what I would be saying to people is, be very careful if you've got maybe 2 or 3 coffee shops opening a restaurant. I sort of stand over that advice. But what we're looking at now is really the conversation that I wanted to have today is this whole thing over the focus on what you're really good at. And note, Maxwell is still all focused on coffee, versus a diversification model where you then do other things. So should you be in a situation whereby some form of problem happens? I have this what if scenario that I go through with people when they're setting up a coffee shop, and it covers all sorts of things, which could be perhaps Starbucks opening next door, roadworks, it could be the whole town shifting one way. There are all sorts of scenarios that happen to people that they need to consider before they open, because actually, regardless of a pandemic, lots of things can happen to that core business that you've got. So we've now moved into a model where we're thinking, actually, if you look at all of those things that Maxwell is doing and a number of other operators, those are probably saving their business. So what I wanted to talk a little bit about was just in a fairly loose way about what we believe are our thoughts in terms of what businesses should look like afterwards. Not everybody can or should go and do all of those things that Maxwell has done, but I think there are a number of key things that people should be doing. I'm just going to have one breath and then say one final thing, because I think it's an important piece. The really important part of any of these brand diversifications, any of these developments of the brand, any of these ways that you can generate extra revenue is, well, first thing is you've got to be able to do it. You've got to be able to put some focus in it, put resource in it, put money into it without damaging the original business. And secondly, you need to have a strong brand. Maxwell has a very strong brand. All sorts of little pieces. If you look at all of his information that goes out there, a very strong color applies across all sorts of different things. There's a very strong brand in terms of classic branding, but there's a very strong name and there's a lot of trust is built up. So if you think about somebody deciding to buy a peak water product, you want to buy it from the guy that wrote the very technical book about water. So there's all sorts of these things all linked together. You can't just decide to go and develop one of those yourself. You can't suddenly go online if you have perhaps got no social media following or no way of contacting your customer other than giving them a leaflet in the shop. So there's all sorts of these pieces that link together. So that's kind of me doing a long-winded introduction, but give me your thoughts, Maxwell.
No, I think, it's hard to do a short, just sort of, it proves there is a spread there, because you can't sum it up simply. I mean, it is all in coffee, and I think that's the one focus that makes sense. And because, use the term one would use the term vertical integration. There's some cross benefits about diversifying in any kind of segment, if you can. I think those years in the coffee shop, I didn't just write the books. I did I took part in the Bristol competitions. I wrote a blog, and a lot of that trust and brand was built there, back before Instagram was so popular and everyone used Twitter to argue about coffee instead. Yeah.
They're still arguing.
Sorry?
They're still arguing.
No, they are, but I think that's probably why I'm drawn to Instagram.
Yeah.
There's just more love on Instagram. But I think it's a really interesting point you make, because even though I was focused within coffee, and everything we did made sense, it didn't just come out of left field. It wasn't it was kind of sequential in a way. Each opportunity begat the other, and it wasn't just an idea in the pub or anything. But at the same time, I ended up in a position where before this pandemic hit, yourself and other people I spoke to had a very strong, valid point. about how spread I was, and I saw the risk myself. You know, if you've got numerous sort of embryonic projects that need money, resource, and time, and also are just not that predictable.
Yes.
You know, take the Peak Water project. I can appreciate a Kickstarter backer just thinking, how could you not plan it properly and get it out on time? Then when I speak to people who work in R&D, you know, of course you're going to try and plan, but you'd be absurd to not realize that a project like that is going to have unforeseen hurdles. Yeah. Right. So, but that's high risk. So the spreading was creating high risk. It meant if one of them fell down, maybe they all fall down.
Yes.
However, this pandemic hit, and ironically, the thing I was starting to rally against has become our, like you said, our saving grace. You know, we're not hit, but I definitely feel very lucky compared to other people I speak to. The coffee business was growing fast in wholesale, but we had this e-commerce platform that we put a lot of energy and time and had an audience with, and that's been able to flourish in the lockdown. I also believe that everything that my brand or personal brand represent is actually very suited to the lockdown. One of the debates I was having with someone, it's just like the growth in making your own sourdough bread.
Yes.
For years, people would say to me, Maxwell, your books are too complicated, you're too niche, you're not appealing to the mass customer. And suddenly, overnight, your mass customer wants to learn about coffee.
Yes.
It's kind of fascinating. So we were very well positioned, but to say
fair point.
But to say that was planned is not at all.
No.
But I think when you do multiple things, you do, if you can do it, you are a bit more nimble and you do pivot a bit quicker.
Yeah.
But in a way, the lockdown has forced our focus. It said, okay, you don't have any wholesale business right now. You don't have these other things. So it's created this focus.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I think, you know, without going through, you know, the enormous book of mistakes, business mistakes that I've made. I think you are probably guilty of something that I've done in the past. You probably haven't done it quite like this. We used to open businesses, myself and a business partner, we used to open all of these businesses, restaurants, all sorts of different things. But we sometimes used to open them with the core context being, hey, this will be fun. And we once opened a domain name registration business in the year 2000. Also, it was like the subtext of that was, hey, this will be fun. And we're quite greedy because there's a lot of money going into, you know, that was
it's an opportunity.
Yeah. And we lost so much money that we had to sell one of our chip shops, which was very profitable, to pay off the debts, which was really painful. So it was, I think, you know, I think the hey, it'll be fun piece actually is really valid for some of us, because I think Peak Water is a fascinating project to me. I can see why you did it.
Yeah, well, you sound like I'd say you're probably a risk taker, John.
Enormous, too much. Yeah. Definitely too much. You know, I less so now, obviously, because you know, but it takes me a while to learn the lessons.
No, yeah, and I think for me, the Peak Water one actually came from a funny place, which is I respect how hard it is to do certain things, and I respect other businesses, and I actually went to other water companies with the idea.
Okay.
And they basically shut the door in my face.
Right.
And if there's one way to make me do something.
Yeah, exactly. I was just about to say, yeah, I understand that.
But I just sort of said, okay, we'll make it ourselves. I didn't think it would be easy, but it's that sort of, and there's that comes with both trepidation, but also the excitement of exploring something that's difficult.
Yeah.
You know, I think for me, if you look at my taking part in barista competitions, but also my new hobby in the last couple of years of powerlifting competitions, I'm now self-aware enough to say I'm a competitive person.
Yeah.
And I think my application to business is where I take the risk is I'm excited by the competition of that. I'm like, oh, it'd be amazing to do something there that hasn't been done. And that's exciting. Yes. And that nearly always comes with risk.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, let me ask you a question within that, because I completely get every part of that. I actually used to do powerlifting at university, so I do watch that stuff that you're doing. I mean, you're way above what I was doing, annoyingly. Actually, quite a long time ago, you were way above what I was doing. I didn't remember properly. But the point is, when you are making those risks, are you, let's say Peak Water, Are you really, so it's hey, it'll be fun, or whatever your version of that is. And look, let's be honest, it really works in terms of having written the book. The platform that you've built, all of those things. It's a sensible business decision. But are you really looking at, when you look at a spreadsheet, a cash flow, a projected profit and loss, budget, are you naturally, are you really looking at the full what if in terms of that it could bring everything down? Or what was your perspective on those kinds of things? In other words, how sensible are you? There's a term that I use that in terms of any project, you need to be short-term pessimistic and long-term optimistic. So you expect everything to go wrong, and then long-term expect that, but hang on, I'm very good at putting my head down and getting the job done.
Yeah, I think when, you've done a hand-to-mouth business but our early businesses were not funded. We opened the doors, maybe had a small bank loan. The only way you could move forward was to generate some more revenue and a bit more profit.
Yes.
And everything we did early days was not an investment case. Was not. That's partly one of the challenges with funding ideas.
Yes.
In a VC world, is there's this appetite to fund a lot of things that will fail, which is not the appetite you have as an individual. Yeah. Business owner.
Yes. Exactly.
So the first several years were about just the hard-learned, hard-fought sustainable operator mindset. Yeah. So even with these risks or these diversifications, I'm thinking to do them, if I thought they could, I don't know what percentage, there's different percentages and different ways you can pitch it. Sure. But I'm definitely saying if this went wrong, I'm thinking now about making sure that it won't be able to take the other things down.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I think also, in fairness to you, 7 to 8 years of grafting away, as it were, with the shop, and then, in fairness, maybe starting to move off slightly, you build a very solid base, in terms of then, the understanding of keeping a stable business, and also not wanting
the cash flow. Yeah. The thing is, you've been past you had a bit of money at the beginning, you spent it, you had your 6-month runway or whatever it was. You've maybe had to reduce your staff in difficult times and work more hours yourself and just flex things to get them to work. The water jug's definitely been the most challenging thing I've undertaken, because, when you flex in another business, when you get something wrong with peak water, that's 150 grand, and what that would have done for me is, the question is, would it have killed it with the idea of just died? And we say, look, or would we have kept doubling down? I saw there's Kickstarter, and then there's another one called Indiegogo.
Yeah.
And this New Zealand team came up with this all-in-one portable espresso machine. And I remember seeing it and thought, wow, that is ambitious. It makes the water jug seem simple.
Yes. And
invariably, they took the money. And that's the thing about those crowdfunding platforms. They're never enough money to do it. You need to find some resource elsewhere. And the whole thing basically failed. And they've doubled down again and asked people for more money, moved their whole family to China. And they're already like $1 million in.
Yes.
And that's, maybe there's a bit of sunken cost fallacy there. Maybe that, maybe they should just call it quits. But I mean, your questions are good. I think, like when things that seem maybe like a whim, they're not. For me, when I do a project, it's because it's really hard to argue you shouldn't do it.
Yeah. Yes. I'll do one 30-second personal story on this, because I've tried to fund through Indiegogo. So I wrote a golf book that sold extremely well. I sold the film rights. We got half a film made. We spent £1.3 million.
Wow.
And then the major backer turned out to be a con man and didn't put his money in. So we got half a film made, and then we missed then, the weather was important. We tried to get money through from other sources. Then we missed a year, obviously, because of the weather and trying to get it all continuity. Then the next year we tried to raise money again, and then we were 2 years on. We went to Indiegogo. But the problem was the sunken cost piece ruined the whole project, because there were original investors who had put money in, and all they wanted to do was some return. We should have actually just started again. And then we could have funded the thing properly, because there were all sorts of commercials behind it. But it's a very good example, brutal example
now
of what I've had in terms of, the sunken cost. People get caught up in sunken cost.
Well, I would say right now is that there's sunken cost fallacy everywhere right now.
Completely agree.
because you had this idea in your head pre-pandemic of where your business was going, what your valuations were, what was your growth goals, and they've just all got to be reset now.
I couldn't agree more, and I think it's a really valid point. And I think the important is it's sunken cost of time and money. So I've actually had a few emails from people going, I've done this amount of years, and I'm exhausted, but I know I need to get this money back for it. And it's like somebody buying a business, particularly in tough times, they don't care about your sunk cost.
No, I think when you raise money, that's interesting too, because if you've ever been through that process, the potential investor coming in, they don't care about the last 5 or 10 or 20 years.
No.
They care about the business today and the opportunity today. And I think that's how you have to think about it as a business owner as well.
Yeah, and I think one of the interesting points is that we touched on a little bit before we started recording it. So if we look at a business like yours with all of these different factors, as you probably know, I do quite a lot with businesses in terms of trying to build up what the exit value might be. And the exit value of a business is essentially the EBITDA, the profit that it makes, the amount of money that it makes, times a multiple. And the multiple has got all sorts of different variations. So for example, in very simple terms, 10 exactly the same coffee shops always have a higher multiple than a group that has 7 vaguely similar coffee shops, maybe a concession and 2 restaurants, because the person coming in can't see this thing to extend out easily. Now, I think there's going to be a change in terms of some of the multiples now, because if we look at your business, what we have is, first of all, let's say you have your own coffee shop. We keep that very simple, but you have the piece of vertical integration, which is the roastery, but then you have platform that actually works without you. The books will keep selling and driving all of those, lots of things that work without you. So what you have is a business that people can come in and see very strong platform, and all of those things really add to the multiple aspect, and a sort of a culture that can and potentially could keep going without you, to an extent. But it's the platform in terms of people thinking, those are the people that business is the business that then does things like peak water, and pioneers, for example, the pods.
Yes.
So you then have a business with a strong platform for high quality coffee that could then be sold to Nestle. I'm really, but you understand. I mean, look, wonderful. But that kind of thing, we look at why Blue Bottle was sold, for those crazy. There's a lot of it within that it's like, well, actually, where can we take this? And I think that the multiple that you might get if those things are tight could potentially be much more post-COVID, because people, you need the right person to buy it anyway. And not sorry, for clarity, he's not trying to sell. Well, not that I know.
But if you want to email me,
but hello, Always.
No, I agree. I agree with you. I think, I almost feel a bit, I feel for somebody who had an extremely successful, focused wholesale business, and they were being the best at that, the best at their one thing. And this has just, this once in a lifetime situation has kind of destroyed them. But, and I can kind of, because I don't think they did anything wrong. If they're sitting there going, to the best of their knowledge, they were running a really great focused business. But I also agree that you mentioned those phases at the beginning. I mean, the coffee industry, I don't think, is going to, those traditional channels are going to bounce back instantly. I think it's going to take time. It's going to be phased. And so for the foreseeable, however many years it is, and if, it goes, the size of the recession and so on and so forth, means, the next decade of business models in coffee should nearly all of them include some consideration of a diversification in sort of how they generate revenue, basically.
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously, I obviously pay a lot of attention to the coffee shop stuff. I also pay attention to some of those roastery chats that are going on. And I really feel for those guys for a couple of reasons. One of which is obviously, clearly they've got a lot of stock that is going to go off.
And relationships with producers,
Yeah, so there's, it's obviously not really my world, but I can see all of that. And I think, there are an awful lot of them. I mean, the competition's horrendous in that market, it seems to me.
To be honest, I think it was getting quite crowded before this hit.
Yeah, that's what I thought. That's my perspective.
Yeah. So, and this kind of puts the cap on it, I think. Yeah. I think COVID kind of says, okay, that was the blue ocean of opening a third wave coffee roastery was the last 10 to 15 years.
Yeah.
And it was already sort of slowing a lot,
yes.
saturated. But this just comes along and says, right, that's the lid on that model.
Yeah. I think the other problem that they have is there is media and consumer support for hospitality.
Yes.
It's high profile. Nearly everybody knows somebody working in it in some form. And I think the suppliers are not getting that. They're not getting that same empathy, or in my opinion, sort of as clearly maybe, and therefore there's less pushing by the Jonathan Downeys of this world to then help to support suppliers.
Yeah. I mean, the issue is if people can't see someone, they can't care about them, right? And I think, but this has always been the issue with wholesale anyway. It's a high risk business because how do you tie yourself into that client if if they can just go to another supplier? Now there's ways to do it, but I think what's interesting and the saving grace of at least the third wave specialty roasteries is they were kind of this hybrid model. They were kind of a wholesale supplier, but they were also putting their brand in people's shops and their brand on Instagram. And what the businesses that I see that are able to sort of navigate through these waters are the ones that were always connecting with their customers with a brand of some kind.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's, even if they were a wholesale business, if they have a brand and they can own some customers and reach out and grow those customers. Yeah. I mean, even coffee shops are the same. Like, if you have enough of an identity as a coffee shop, one of our clients is a company in Cambridge called Bold Brothers. Mm-hmm. They have 2 shops, and they've done a really good job of continuing to engage their client base online. And I think, you talk about online, like selling online, but it's just, you just need to engage people.
Yeah. I mean, it's something that, I've been harping on about now, probably very strongly with clients for about 1.5 years, because I put together a whole structure for how they should be engaging online, primarily Instagram and Facebook, because that's where the customers are. Twitter is just this weird thing where the industry kind of chats. And there's a process for how they engage, and they should be doing that at all times. And those folks that have done it, they then have this model whereby they can continue to engage. They can continue to, show behind the scenes things, and how to do the AeroPress, the V60, and all of those things. I mean, we're clearly, it's like, my Instagram feed is literally.
Well, no one can complain after this that they don't know how to make a V60.
You're absolutely right. You are absolutely right. And it's like, it was one of those things that I would be advising people to do to begin with. I'm not anymore. It's like, that piece has had its moment, but, and then of course there's the piece where you go, look, give away your treasured banana bread recipe. This is the time to do that, because all you're looking for is that engagement, so that when you get open again, you appear in their feed. But I think one of the problems for coffee shops, and I do empathize with this, is, for the folk that aren't in your situation, or maybe staring, I don't know how I'm going to get through it, the energy to post positive stuff is pretty tough to pull together if you know what you're going to do.
And you look at it in the midst of when it all hit, a lot of us all of our energy was just going into sort of figuring out what we were going to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's like a shock, and all the focus is inward, and then it's like, okay, well, now I need to make sure I continue to engage outwardly. And I think even the businesses that have a strong engagement, sort of took a while to go, we need to, the impact. And I still think there's a lot of people I speak to who are not properly planning for the next couple of phases.
They're definitely not.
Yeah.
I mean, I essentially came up with this little concept, but I stole it a little bit from the interview that I did with Paul Rawlinson, who runs a really good cafe, food-driven cafe with a kind of a Norwegian theme in Harrogate. And he has just opened a bakery. He was opened 1 week. 1 week later, and he wouldn't have got it opened. It's been his savior. Got it open by the skin of his teeth. Classic piece of vertical integration. And he talked about these phases, and I've just kind of elaborated on them, and so I do need to name check him. But I think you're absolutely right. He's a guy who has driven his business from day one with daily looking at his cash flow. So he's one of those people that I often refer to in terms of other clients and going, look, you do need to look at this cash flow. You've got to keep looking at the cash flow, because whether you're doing a peak water or opening a roastery or opening a bakery or any of these other things, any of these other diversifications that you might do, or an online business, there's a cost to it. And at some stage in your cash flow, it's the rent month, the VAT month,
I also believe, one thing I believe a digital business is is a completely different animal.
It is.
And even if you want to pivot, it doesn't mean you can.
Yeah, you're totally right.
And I also believe, I think I'm pretty capable, and I can sort of apply myself across different channels. What I've learned with the digital one is you need digital experts in your team.
Yes.
In the team, not a consultant, you need, they have value too, but you need someone there every day helping you understand those metrics, those channels, those conversions.
Yeah.
And that's the challenge about pivoting now. If you built your whole business to be a team of wholesale experts.
Yeah.
And then, so I think the digital one is a little bit, it's easy to go, oh, let's sell online. Engaging people online is one thing. Engaging people as a wholesale business online is one thing. But actually trying to grow and acquire customers via Google and Facebook and everything, I don't think should be taken lightly.
I couldn't agree more, because part of another side of my business is we run an awful lot of Facebook ads. At one stage, within for one client, more than 20 grand a month. So, so more than 20 grand a week. So now it's not my expertise, but it's within something else that I do. So, but that, knowing Facebook ads is very different from knowing Google ads. You need a Facebook ads expert separate to a Google ads expert if you're really going deep.
Well, and then you need to, I think I remember speaking to a few founders of very well-known digital coffee businesses, and the biggest fallacy is this idea that there's all this extra margin.
Yes.
Because the margin that you give to a private label or a wholesaler, well, then yes, you make less technically gross profit margin, but to get those eyeballs online, to spend money on those ads, and coffee's a tough one. Like, most of what I hear is that coffee's got a £30 acquisition cost. Right. Which is high, right? You sell a bag of coffee for under a tenner.
Yeah.
The only way you're making that work is to get them into a subscription. Yes. Now, that was like an average I gave, for having a strong story like we have means we can do that for less.
Yeah.
But I think you've got to fight for those eyeballs online. And what you're saying about coming out of this and connecting with your customers,
yes,
that challenge is easily as big online, because there's so many people there. And one of my questions about this, as everyone in coffee pivots online, how does that space change? Does it become more expensive to bid on freshly roasted coffee in the UK, etc.? Yeah.
I think my assumption on that is yes, because if you look at that wholesale piece, there are, as I say, looking in as a little bit of an outsider to that industry, obviously, not completely outsider. But yes, there's a lot of people out there they're doing a number of different things. There are several categories. At one end, you've got people like you who just have been doing it. You have the thing worked out. And then you've got folk at the other end who are going, we have no idea about that.
Yeah.
What we're good at is this thing, and we're not going to do that. We understand that it's very expensive, and we're going to build the thing back up again ourselves. And create a core business. It's very hard to argue against that. And then you've got various folk in the middle, all of whom will be dabbling at it. Some of those dabblers will have some money, and they will punt it in, and then they will mess up the cost of acquisition.
Precisely, yeah. And then, heavily funded business in coffee as well. Like, there's a lot of businesses in coffee. I've especially seen this in wholesale supply.
Yeah.
Where, the model is not representative of a sustainable model, because it doesn't need to be. It has deep enough pockets to run at a loss.
Yeah.
But those people are still in your marketplace. They're still having an impact on what people expect to pay per kilo, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
But I think, I wouldn't say to people, don't play online. I would just say, I think it's an area to definitely collaborate. Get recommendations for you know, whether it's freelancers or agencies. And yeah, like you say, just do a simple P&L about, okay, what can I spend here? The nice thing about online is, on the one hand, there's lots of costs you don't know about.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, you can figure that out nice and gradually, week by week.
Yeah.
You know, you can spend 100 quid on Facebook and go, oh, yeah, we found this and we found. Now, opening a shop, you know, in a new location, and you've done a fit out for however many 100,000.
Exactly right.
Is much riskier. So there's really pros and cons to these. So I think it's just, they are different. Yeah.
When we do those courses to help people set up coffee shops, you know, there are so many people want to have the people coming outside of the industry, you know, all those folk, the dreamers, you know, they're sitting in their office or whatever, and they've got a little bit of money, or there's money, you know, there's spare money in the house, and they're looking out the window thinking, oh, I just have a little coffee shop. What they want is this, they always just want this full-blown coffee shop. They want, you know, the full lease, the staff, the perfect design, and all of those things. Very few of them are prepared to go and buy a little coffee cart and actually work out their deep skills for a very little amount of money, and see
low risk. Yeah.
And then if they can't do it, then sell the cart for, I don't know, maybe $1,000 less, maybe $1,000 more than you bought it for. So I think it's a similar analogy in terms of that. Yeah, you can play.
Yeah, well, that's actually what we did with so the events business. Well, I actually got that a bit wrong. I thought it was lower risk, and it kind of was, but you have to pay for your pitch fee to do the event a year before, right?
Yeah. Yes.
But then when we realised that actually that wasn't the type of coffee business we wanted to grow.
Yes.
We found a shop in Bath, the original shop, and it was tiny, 5 seats, but it had the accommodation free above.
Right.
It couldn't fail really on paper.
That's right.
Like, and you know, me and my wife ran it, no staff, and then that got busy. Then we sold the events business because we couldn't manage both. Then we moved to the shop we're in now, which was the bigger shop with the bigger investment. Yeah. Yeah. But you've worked
but
to
it's
that
very
point.
Cautious growth. Yeah. And I think that's, and I still, look, I really stand over that. That's an advice that I'm never going to stop giving, that people need to understand how to do that. If you think about how many people have started that way, you know, Gwilym.
Well, I agree with you. And I think when you're talking about diversifying or pivoting during this time, it's with that mindset.
Yes, exactly.
It's not the time to suddenly go and take a huge punt somewhere. It's the time to actually spread your bets, you know, kind of conservatively, but cleverly, and just keep moving forward. Yeah. But I think the worst thing to do right now as a business owner is just to sit and wait.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
And I think that's the interesting point. So the way that I look at it is, there's a whole load of core solid. You take the coffee shop piece. There's a whole load of core solid things that people should be doing right now. Some of which are really boring, like putting in systems, reworking their staff training, but they should be definitely looking at their menu. They should be definitely looking at their costings. They should be definitely assuming that the customer, the new consumer in this deep recession that we're going to be in, is going to value better. So, you know, you look post 2008, we had, you know, Greggs and Wetherspoons and all these value things going through the roof. That's also going to happen. But I reiterate that in the coffee shop world, that £3 latte, flat white, is an affordable luxury. It's the lipstick factor, as they would talk about. So people need to continue to do what they do as well as they can, but understand that their menu will need to be tweaked, maybe some bundling, maybe some more perceived value. But the customer you're going to be scrapping over every penny. So there's loads of stuff: menu, merchandising, people development, the promotional piece. The promotional piece is not spending a lot of money. It's just really working all that social media. There is
and loyalty reward is probably be bigger than ever on the other side as well. You know,
I think so. I think that's a really interesting one, because I saw somebody, you know, I run this little cafe and coffee shop on our Facebook group, and about 650 people in there. And somebody came in and said, well, you know, I'm definitely going to be cutting out my loyalty system after this. You know, why should we be giving it away to them? And it's like, whoa, no. You've got this wrong. I mean, I didn't even answer.
Yeah, I mean, from a coffee shop, that's like owner to customer, but it's the same for wholesaler to client.
Exactly.
Right? This is the time, no matter how hard it is, if you can, you know, extend, you know, a hand of support, and whether that's a green buyer saying, you know what, you can have another 60 days, or a roaster saying, you know, we know you're going to pay us when you can, you're in a hard position. Yeah. It's the same with your customer in the shop. We know you're in a different position, and you've got to give more on the other side, not less. Yeah.
The business needs to be tight. I mean, I'm sure you've watched some of the Propel ones, and some of those guys running those very big businesses, the private equity backed and everything. Some of them are just towing a very clear party line, and it's like, it's not very interesting. But 2 or 3 of them have been very honest and said, you know what, we now have the time. We know we weren't doing some stuff very well, and that might be people development, it might be recruitment, it might be, the training, it might be induction, it might be, operational systems, it might just be portion control. But now is a time actually that people should be doing that work before it all starts off again.
100%. It's too late otherwise. And actually the length of the lockdown, it's long enough to let everybody know that there is a permanent change.
That's right.
But it's also long enough to give people the time to adapt to that change.
Yeah.
Rather than, because I think, starting to think about, okay, how are you going to redesign your cafe or tweak it? And when you do reopen, but then not just the next 6 months, but the next 12 months, the next 18 months. And even, let's say, the most obvious changes are, plastic barriers and stuff.
Yes.
Even when they come down in a year or two's time, the market's a different place. That's regardless. Right. So yeah, it's super interesting. I think coffee's in an interesting space. It's nowhere near as desolate as some other spaces.
Yeah, I agree.
And that's kind of exciting in one way. But you're going to have to adapt. Yeah.
I think there's a couple of key, very practical things that I would say on that front. You're absolutely right. I think there's a lot of people sitting out there. The analogy that I always have in my head is because we've got teenagers in the house. It's like, that teenage market and early 20s, they probably they're obsessed with 2 things. I'm stereotyping massively, but it's a quite useful thing to do. Getting back to McDonald's and for some of them, and getting into a Nando's or a Wagamama. Yeah. Those brands that are, so that you have a whole chunk of people who are desperate to get out there, and they'll be okay. I mean, they are both okay at the moment. That mid-market thing they're going to be, Carlucci's are gone, but we're going to have a lot more of that. Fine dining is going to be a mess, as we all know, unless you're night. Yeah. But I think, but what in our market, those people who've kept up a very strong brand, there'll be people in Bath who are desperate to get back to your shop, because they've been looked after very well. There are people, I mean, I see it, for all those great operators that have been there for long periods of time. Peter at Caffè is a classic example. People
are very loyal.
People are desperate to get back to Flat White. People are desperate to get back to their really good local coffee shop. Now, Peter's in a terrible situation because there's nobody in the street.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's interesting one with the coffee shops, they're not just desperate to get, this is something wonderful about coffee. They're not just desperate to get back to get their coffee. They're desperate to support that business.
That's right. Absolutely right.
I've had customers on LinkedIn just say to me, "Oh, can I just buy 50 quid's worth of coffee, and I don't even want any coffee from it. I just want to support what you do." So, when you're that independent business with a loyal following, and people come there because they know they don't just love the staff, they love everything the business stands for. I think they're in the strongest position. It's those businesses that maybe don't connect or resonate in that way. A slightly bigger business, maybe more stores that are really going to have really have a challenge.
Yeah. I think you're absolutely right. I mean, I was talking to Paul from Balthamsons about what he might change in the 4th phase, and he's not going to change very much. But that's because he has an extremely good model. The customers are treated so well. He has a very strong team. He has very good food. Interestingly, he's very honest about it. His coffee is exactly right for his market. It's not top end specialty, but it's exactly right, and his customers think it's perfect.
Yeah.
So those people that have done that, they're okay. But the others are going to have to really work at those core fundamentals of the business,
Yeah, and I think one of our clients in Milton Keynes, owner operator, multiple stores, but just natural sort of entrepreneur, like driving around delivering chocolate and coffee and to the customers, and they're not just sitting there going, "Oh, it's all gone." They're just and actually what they're doing will stay on the other side, and it will be a hybrid model.
Yes.
But fundamentally, he's still offering the same things. He's just finding slightly different ways to offer it. And I think that's what I would assume that's what you mean. And it's what I mean when I say pivot. It doesn't mean just completely change.
Yeah.
it means just tweak the channels of how you get things to people and how you work with your customers.
Yeah, and I just think, so there in my mind, there are two aspects. All of those core fundamentals are as important as ever. The most obvious one is menu and merchandising. Menu needs to be reworked. It's going to need to be reworked a bit. The merchandising piece, which I bang on about endlessly, but that's because we had garden centers as well as our cafes. Yeah. So in my garden center business, 2/3 of the revenue was from £3 million worth of it was retail.
Wow.
About $1.5 million, a bit more, nearly 2 million from the cafes. Yeah. Retail was about $1.5 million from 2 cafes at that stage. So it's the retail skills that I learned then, because I was always hospitality before that, that have been very, very useful to me afterwards. Now, the retail piece the merchandising piece, when people just take away initially or holding back, it's going to be more important than ever. So I think people are going to have to look hard at their merchandising and realize that their average transaction value is going to fall if nobody's sitting in. So how can they get out more product, and how do they how can they create product that can be distributed more easily takeaway? And secondly, then how can they make sure that is merchandised so that the customer actually buys it? Yeah,
that you sort of, the way you're presenting yourself is changing, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And also even things like, and then can you get that coffee bag sale at the end? What else can you do to build up your business in this phase 3 piece? Both from an operational perspective, but also just squeezing out extra whatever pennies you can get out of it. So if you have a bag of coffee, for example, in your store, people then they'll buy it to support rather than going to supermarket and buying whatever.
Yeah, it's a product that they feel they have the opportunity to buy from. It's kind of open. It's open to persuasion.
Very much so.
It's like, well, you could buy this in many different ways, and it's the price point where people can play around and make different decisions. Yeah.
So
I was going to say, I'm aware that we could talk forever. Elliot and Dan will be angry with us.
They will. Well, no, actually, they're okay with me going longer in these now. But yeah, I was about to say we should be starting to wrap this up. So look, I enormously appreciate your time. Some really interesting points there. I think there's a whole ton of stuff in terms of just interesting, I hope interesting context for what happens in the future, but I think also some important stuff on the in terms of what can be going on now. So look, I wish you the best of luck. I look forward to my peak jug arriving, which you said, what did you say? It might even be going out today.
It might do. I might send it out to you personally, John.
Okay. Yeah. If we hadn't gone on so long here, you've run out of time.
Yeah, it's your fault that you're not getting it. Yeah.
Tomorrow's fine.
It's great to chat, John.
Yeah, we'll speak very soon. Look out.
Take care.
Cheers.
Bye.